Thank you all, everybody that's viewing us. Thank you for participating. This is a discussion, first of several discussions. We are endeavoring to create a conference, a opportunity for the community to learn, to be empowered. So true to our ask, align, and act model, we asked the community what they wanted to hear, what they wanted to learn, how they wanted to be empowered. And this is a community-driven event. This was planned by the community for the community. And so this is what we have been able to produce so we can empower and give tools that will support community building moving forward. So with that, this is the first one. Our second one will happen on August 1st. And we will continue the conversation, again, predicated on what the community wants to learn about and wants to discuss. And then it will culminate in a community conference, August 22nd, virtual community conference. Continue to look at our241.com for that information. We'll update it as our details are confirmed. So with that, I'll lead you into our panel discussion as far as introducing our panelists. And again, we do have one more that will be joining us. So let's begin with Dr. Katrina Thompson Moore, who is an associate professor in the Department of History and African American Studies at St. Louis University. She is the author of Ring Shout, Will About, the Racial Politics of Music and Dance in North American Slavery. In this ambitious project, Dr. Moore examines the manner Blacks use music and dance to gain power, speak in hidden language, and express culture. Her book has won several awards, and most recently in 2020, named by the Washington Post as the top 13 books in African American history to read. Welcome, Dr. Katrina Thompson Moore. Dr. Gina Gum McClendon is the director of the Voter Access and Engagement and the Financial Capability and Asset Building Initiatives at the Center for Social Development. Her work primarily involves policy research, analysis, and consultation with community-based programs, academic institutions, state and federal policymakers, and advocacy groups. Dr. McClendon earned her PhD in urban higher education from Jackson State University, Jackson, Mississippi. She received her Master's of Management and Leadership from Fontbonne University and in St. Louis, and a Bachelor of Science degree from SIU Carbondale. Welcome, Dr. Gina McClendon. Captain Clay Farmer has served as a police officer for 19 years first with the City of Anita Park, which is now North County Police Cooperative. Farmer served as the commander of the Delwood, Pinelawn, and Upland Park precincts, and also as the department's commanders of community engagement, public relations, school resource officer, training coordinator, housing supervisor, and is responsible for recruitment and hiring. Under his commands, officers were required to participate in a multitude of community partnerships and programs. Currently, he works with the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney, Wesley Bell. Jerryl T. Christmas, who has not joined us yet, but he is an attorney and activist with over 20 years of experience focusing on criminal defense, personal injury, and civil rights litigation. He served as a parole officer for the state of Georgia, assistant circuit attorney for the city of St. Louis. Jerryl ran for circuit attorney and worked on a number of state and local campaigns. He assisted in election of Claire McCaskill to the United States Senate and served as legislative counsel in Washington, D.C. Jerryl is a 1994 graduate of Texas Southern University Thurgood Marshall School of Law and has deep ties in the St. Louis County. He has he lives here with his wife, Jackie, and 4 daughters. Last but not least, Christopher Krehmeyer, who is Beyond Housing CEO and president and our facilitator for the day. I could go on and on about his accolades, but I'm just gonna say he is from St. Louis. Born and raised, graduating from Washington University in 1986 with a degree in urban study. Chris has been actively involved in the field of family housing and community development in a variety of capacities. Overall, great guy, my boss, and we're gonna leave it at that because we will be here all day reading this. And I think you have a guest if you wanted to introduce him before we started.
I do. I'm going to take moderator license and do a little off script here, but given the sad passing of both Congressman John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian, I thought it was appropriate that my good friend, Congressman Lexie Clay, to say a few words, because our subject matter certainly is something that Congressman Lewis and Reverend Vivian were engaged and led their entire lives. So we're here at the Pagedale Family Support Center doing a food distribution event. I just stepped inside to do this. The Congressman was nice enough to come out and help us distribute food to folks in the 24-1 community and some of the surrounding communities. So I asked him, could he just say a few things, both about Congressman Lewis in particular, since that was his his mentor and someone he worked with for many, many years, but obviously the subject matter at hand. So I said, he is a politician. I said, you got about 5 minutes, Congressman, and then we got to get back to our agenda. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Congressman Lexie Clay.
Thank you so much, and hello, everyone. And let me first thank Beyond Housing for what you do in this community, Chris, as well as your entire staff, Raina, and all the others, because you make a difference. When you look at the city of Pagedale, when you look at the 24 communities that have progressed under Beyond Housing's leadership, it speaks volumes about the work you do. But I'm here today to tell you that the world has lost two iconic figures in a matter of hours. One's Reverend C.T. Vivian, and the other, my good friend and colleague, John Lewis. Both of them changed the course of history in this country. They were responsible for the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the 1968 Fair Housing Act, and until the day John Lewis and C.T. Vivian passed away, they were still involved in the struggle. So I will miss them, but this country is better off because we had a John Lewis and a C.T. Vivian as part of our history. And think about their humble beginnings, starting in the segregated South and enduring what they did. An apartheid system legally structured in this country, and to change all of that made a difference to millions of people in this world. So let me again say thank you all for your work in this community, and just know that we in Congress are pushing for the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, because we have to change the culture of policing in this nation. And I've shared with Governor Parsons, Mayor Cruz, and County Executive Page that you start changing the culture by changing the makeup of police departments. I've told state legislators, since they're going to have a special session on criminal justice in the state legislature, and they're going to address the residency rule with the St. Louis Police Department, they need to put into the law that 50% or more of all classes coming into the academy will be African American, because we want people who are culturally sensitive, who understand our community, to be guardians of our community and not warriors who come from racist communities. We don't need that in our community. So that's just what I want to leave you with, Chris, and to say thank you all for your indulgence.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate those good words. Thanks for all the great work, and
thank you, sir.
Condolence on the loss of Congressman Lewis, an icon and a great man.
Appreciate you.
All right, take care. All right, let's get back to our agenda, but again, a fair amount of sad serendipity given the subject matter that we're talking about. So there's really four things we're going to go over on this panel, kind of a bit of history and kind of roll it forward. Talk about protests, police brutality, and then community policing. The new call for defund the police, and what does that mean, and what is it trying to accomplish? And lastly, kind of voter education. So we'll cover that first ground. Let's start with history, and this is for Dr. Moore and Dr. McClendon. In 2014, St. Louis kind of spoke up and spoke out about racial injustice, police brutality, and mobilized for change. when you two think about those 2014 protests and all that came from it, the good press, the bad press, and everything else, give us your thoughts about, was all the good press justified? Was the negative press justified? I'll start with you, Dr. Moore.
There was, I think what often overshadows with the press for 2014 is the negative press. That seems to often overshadow it. And so there were some, press has been broadened. So you have Twitter, you have Facebook. And so that was also getting the message out. And a lot of that was positive, showing various perspectives of what was taking place. And so it was positive in a way that influenced change, influenced people thinking. And it also spread the word. So you have reactions internationally of what's taking place in Ferguson, in Missouri, and people were appealing to it and recognizing their own struggle with it. Now, the negative part of 2014 protests always comes with protests of brown and Black people. Brown and Black people, when they protest, they're always thugs. They're thugs in the 1960s, they're thugs in the 1950s, they're thugs today. And so that is nothing new. Dr. King, the two brothers we just talked about, John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian, they were all called thugs, troublemakers. You're doing too much. You're moving too fast. And these were people who were active in nonviolent resistance. And so the negative press only illustrates the continual racism that is in our media and that's in our society. Because to understand that, one, anytime Dr. King's on the list in COINTELPRO and being surveyed and being, on FBI's list and considered a terrorist of his time. And then you have brothers today saying, please stop killing me. Please get your feet off of my neck. And they're called thugs. Whether you have a suit on in 1960s or you have on jeans and a t-shirt today, the negative press does hurt. But it does, I'm hoping the positive, if your human side comes out, you realize that this is a legitimate fight that people are doing and that there is a righteous anger that is being expressed. And so, yes, there's negative protests. There'll always be negative displays of Black and brown people who are fighting for their rights.
Yeah, but Dr. Moore, just real quick, I've heard the phrase that a lot of folks that have sanitized the history of Dr. King, that they want to think about him in these, loving and kind ways, not recognize what you just said, right? When he was alive, he was not the saint that, so many folks think of him today. Talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll move on to Dr. McClendon and kind of get her thoughts as well.
History, and as a historian, we have a way of people are either heroes or villains, right? So they're either perfect human beings or they are people who hurt. And so, and that's something that we have to rethink as just human beings. And so with Dr. King, one of the last things Dr. King did when he was killed at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, is he closed his hand over a cigarette because he smoked, and he didn't want people to know he smoked but to me, I emphasize that with my students because that made him very, very human, right? That all these people are humans that recognize the flaws in our society and are willing to sacrifice themselves for it. And so Dr. King, people said, if you read the letter of Birmingham jail, and not just as a class assignment, read it. These are ministers telling him, you're going too fast. You're causing too much trouble, right? He wrote on toilet paper, on small sheets of paper and said, but when? If not now. And so if you look at how he is described, if you look at the fact that you actually have FBI agents that are secretly within SNCC and SCLC and Black Panther Party self-defense as they're giving out breakfast food and watching them and trying to set up these people. These people are more complex, but they were considered terrorists. And those were the words that would have been used. And so we have to understand that. So it's really interesting. I'm curious, and I pray to be alive in 50 years to see how we restructure and think about 2014, because the way we think about 2014 is not the way we're going to have it in our history books necessarily in 50 years. People who were thugs on the news would be maybe heroes in the book, or people who really, really sacrificed their life may not be mentioned at all. And so we have to understand that we need to have more understanding of the complexity of humans and those people who are heroes and villains, and that they're always in this middle. And so I think with King, with Reverend, I mean, these people were beat while they had their collars on as Reverend and priest, and they were called thugs. So I think that I'm okay with being a thug for social righteousness and protest. Please let me be a thug. In the 60s, they were very proud of holding up and taking those pictures when they were getting arrested. They were, they were proud of that because they knew they were standing for what was right. It's just a society is what they're fighting. There's a society that created that term of thugs towards Black people standing up for themselves. They're fighting the institutional racism. So we need to understand that. So when you look at someone who doesn't have on a suit and doesn't have the titles behind their name, but they're saying the right thing, I don't care if they're shirtless and torn up jeans, we need to respect them and respect their leadership and the fact that they're standing up for what's socially, morally right.
Thank you. Dr. McClendon, your thoughts on 2014 and
2014. Well, in order to answer that question, I have to kind of tell you a little bit about how I grew up in the era in which I grew up. So I got an opportunity to see the civil rights movement, to see voting rights movement, but only sitting in the living room on the floor as a kid and watching those things happen. What I quickly realized as I became an adult is that I benefited from all of those things that came out of that, BEOG grants, all that kind of stuff that afforded me the benefit of being able to get a college education, to walk around and not feel like I'm going to be persecuted. The other side to that is that the community that I grew up in experienced white flight. We moved there in the 60s. By the 70s, there wasn't any white people there anymore. The plus side to that was we had our own businesses. We had our own police. We had Black police. They had to live in that community. Community policing was where it's at. That's what happened. You just, it was there and it was real. I didn't realize I needed to be afraid until I left my community, to be afraid of the police. So when I think about the 2014 movement, I also want to think about, our great icons that just passed away, but in particular, the fearlessness of Congressman Lewis and his fight for racial justice and voting rights. And I want to put them together in a way, the civil rights movement and all the other movements, because in the 2014 movement, and maybe some people won't agree with me, but it was a fight for racial and social justice. And to me, it's sort of like this 21st century style of a movement that I think that is akin to getting into good trouble. Now, granted, there were some negative things that happened, and I couldn't quite get my head around the burning, the looting. What was that about? I was walking into a store one day, and I stopped a young man. He might have been a millennial or a little bit older or something like that. And I said, "What do you think about this?" And he said, "I don't like it either." He said, "But guess what? Had it not happened, it would have just been another Mike Brown killed in the street and nobody would have done anything." I said, there it is. And so then I started thinking about some of the other movements and things like that. So while people can say what they want, the 2014 movement inspired me. It made me think more about what I can do, because I'm the person that benefited from some of those other things. And I'm glad I had an opportunity to experience and see it.
Wonderful. So Dr. McClendon, you alluded to this. This is another question for you and Dr. Moore. So how does the 14 protests, the protests today, how do they compare to the 60s and 70s, the protests that happened then?
Well, I think the differences. I'm not real sure if there are a lot of differences. And what I mean by that is that the way that people think about what's right and what's just and what needs to happen, I think all of that is sort of in the same realm. You talked about, you asked Dr. Moore about Martin Luther King, and I think one of the things that people don't realize is that he was starting to change his thinking. And she alluded to that about what needed to happen, that there wasn't an economic development engine in part of the civil rights movement, that there were some things that just weren't making sense. And he knew he was beating his head up against the wall and was thinking about how to bring about change in another way. And so I think that other way and an additional way of thinking about how you protest, how you create movements is a result of having had the civil rights movement. I think it's given us, everybody, an opportunity to take another look and see that movement through another lens. And had it not been for that movement, a whole lot of things wouldn't have happened. So, but anyway.
And so also with the similarities and difference with the 60s and today, one of the style, the social disruption, in 2014, they were standing in the street and on the highway, blocking traffic. That is what they did in the 1960s. That's what they did here in St. Louis in the 1960s with the group like Action. CORE was very active here. They blocked traffic. They blocked people from leaving certain businesses that weren't hiring Black and brown people. So that is the same. What is the major difference? And I think it's both positive and negatives. One, you have social media. Social media changes the game. Everyone isn't a reporter. You get every perspective, you get every moment, everyone. And so one, and you get it instantly. You're not getting on the nightly news, right? We have 24-hour news now. They didn't have the 1960s. The 1960s, you don't start having nightly news until Vietnam bodies start coming back. And then people are really sort of watching news. So that news thing was new, and so people now, one, sometimes we have too much. So you become desensitized, right? Sometimes you have too much and it's all coming in. So it becomes desensitized. Unlike the nightly news, you're sitting there with your family and it's like, oh my gosh, it's a shocker. It's not a shocker to us anymore. Also in the 1960s, we as Black people had leaderships that were spokespersons. Everyone did not agree with these spokespersons, but they were determined by either media, the political power, and several organizations that were the leaders. So you have these umbrella groups like Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Congress on Racial Equality. These are groups that all work together, but they allowed, in some ways, King to give that speech or Lewis to give that speech to represent them, even though they had conflict within. And so the media determined and the politicians determined that King is going to be the leader here. That didn't happen over there. In Mississippi, you have Medgar Evers. You have different leaders. You have Daisy Bates and some, and so, but they're determined and they have the physical look and the appeal that goes off and they said, these are the spokespersons. Today in 2014 and today, there's no one group that I can name that says, okay, this is the national leader. This is the umbrella group. And we have this person. Now we have symbols and martyrs who did not choose to be martyrs for these movements. But we don't have one particular leader. And there's not, in the 1960s, it was clear, Jim Crow, ending desegregation, getting voting. That's a very clear thing. Everyone can stand behind that. Once you have a lot of those check boxes, some of the things, other parts are not as easy to unveil. And so one thing also, the 1960s movement neglected a lot of urban areas, right? It was northern or urban areas. So, and even the Midwest urban areas, that was a majorly Southern urban movement. And so the big difference of not having that leader or organizations or preset organizations does cause some confusion today. Some people, I know in 2014, I remember the media kept saying, well, what do you want? And they asked this brother, walking down the street in Ferguson, what do you want? He's gonna say what he wants. Then he asked this sister over here, walking in St. Louis City in a protest, what do you want? She's gonna say what she wants. Now you have groups that are active, but there are a lot of different groups out there. And because there isn't this umbrella group, and not saying it's needed because it's a different generation, leadership is thought of differently. However, it does for people who are not in it, they're confused in some ways. In 2014, I think a lot of people were confused about, okay, what exactly do you want? And even, we're going to get into this. Some people don't understand, what does defund the police even mean? And so you have media correspondents and these people who are not even necessarily a part of the movement who are speaking. And so those are one of the biggest differences. And we'll see, because we do a lot of the same things from the 60s, but those are the major changes that I've seen from today and yesterday.
And then one more quick question, and maybe a quick answer. How did 2014 set the stage for 2020? That's both Dr. Moore and Dr. McClendon. Short, brief answers if you could, so we can get on our agenda.
Okay, so so to lead into the answer to the response that I have, one of the things that I think has always been the problem is that there's always a danger in the single story. So we've always been hearing the same story over and over and over and over again. And if everybody's hearing the same story and the truth really isn't being told, then this is what we get. So I think what has the benefit, or how the movement set the stage for 2020, is that people are finally getting the truth and are finally being able to speak their truth and try to understand what has really happened and what's going on.
Thank you. Dr. Moore?
And so the tactics, the style of civil unrest, and this may seem unimportant, but even the same words are said: hands up, don't shoot, I can't. The same words are said. That brings, you may be in different places, but that brings a common chant, a common stance. And so what happened in Ferguson in 2014, no one knew what Ferguson was, if you're not from the area, really did contribute to a new social major impact. It was loud. It was continuous. They didn't stop. It wasn't a one-day protest. It was going to different houses throughout the city. That's what's going on now. So I don't think you would see the protest the way it is today if it wasn't for what happened. So Ferguson and everyone that was involved in that throughout this region really set the national, international stage, because there's disruptions throughout the city at the same time. And so there's a lot of influence today.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's bring our other two panelists into the conversation. Captain Farmer and Jerryl Christmas. And good to see you, Jerryl. Thanks for joining us. We'll move on to protests, police brutality, and community policing. So protests have highlighted police brutality, racial profiling, and unfair treatment among African Americans and people of color, which we still see today. Three short questions on a big topic. Has there been any progress toward the shift in community policing? What does community policing really look like? And why are some police departments not willing to change? We'll start with Captain Farmer.
Yes, sir. Appreciate your question, Chris. I think that there has been a positive shift in the way that the police departments are engaging more with the community in the community aspect. The community policing realm. I see it a lot with the different departments that we interact with. Of course, I have a lot of colleagues. One thing that we made it a point, even in our office, like we come out and we visit all of the departments. I believe we visited every single one of them. We've done ride along. So I think, and just listening to the residents, I think there has been a shift. But at the same time, we have so much more work to do. I mean, we can always be better, right? There's a huge room for improvement. But I think overall that there has been a better effort put forward into this community policing thing since Ferguson happened.
Jerryl?
How's everybody doing?
We're good. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good. Thanks for having me. I think that we have not had a shift in policing, and we still have a significant problem with policing. We see what's happening in the St. Louis metropolitan area right now, the problems that we're having with Florissant, problems that we continue to have with the court systems in Ferguson, problems that we have with the municipalities in St. Anne, St. John, and all around. The problem is that we have a culture that has developed in policing that has not changed, and the culture is still the same. So we've moved on in time, but the police culture has not changed, and we have been unable to break that culture. And that's why we talk about defunding the police, because we have invested entirely too much revenue in policing, and we have not invested enough revenue in other issues that are concerned.
Looks like Jerryl froze a little bit there. So Captain Jerryl, you back?
I think I lost you for a minute. Did I lose you?
Yeah, you're back now. Go ahead, finish your thought.
So my thought is that we have to reallocate the funding towards other issues that are critical in our community and not just focus on policing. I believe St. Louis is the 5th largest police state in the country. So if more police was the solution, we wouldn't be in a problem, or we wouldn't have the problems that we have now.
Captain Farmer, you want to kind of respond to that notion of culture, right? I think your comments were there has been progress made, right? But can you talk to Mr. Christmas's notion of the culture is still not what it needs to be?
Right, absolutely, and that's why I made it a point to say there is much more work that needs to be done, but there has been a positive shift. I'm all about. I think people use when they hear defund, they think of it as a negative thing because that means take away, right? I would have no problem reallocating funds when it comes to the police departments, but I think that it shouldn't be a blanket deal. We should look at each budget because every police department doesn't have millions of dollars in their budget, and taking just away a slight portion of that when they're already robbing Peter to pay Paul, or they're already driving 10-year-old cars, that may be crippling to them. But I would like to see them reallocated, like more social workers that come out to work with us. That would be huge if they would respond to these calls with us, or we wouldn't even have to go to certain calls at all. One thing that I talk about with my colleagues and friends and family, I would like to see more funds toward trauma help for police officers, because not only do citizens go through trauma, police officers go through them as well. And I know I say that, we can train, and that's great. We need that. But one thing you can't take away is the human factor in this job. And so we have problems at home. We may have an issue with our wife or our husband or our kids, or having an issue at school, or we're trying to pay a bill, and then we have to come to work and deal with other people issues that are having the same issues, and we're expected to get it right 1,000% of the time. Or we may have been involved in a shooting, or we may see dead kids, or it's just an array of things that are very traumatic to us. So that's one thing I would like to see done for police officers, because that's a big aspect of our job. So just things like that. I'm not opposed to defunding, but reallocating in a great way, in a positive way, where we can help the community and the police department. I'm all for it.
All right, so we've made a nice segue to kind of the next subject matter. So Jerryl, could you maybe help those who are listening defund the police? In your mind, kind of give us a definition, and then what would that look like?
Well, when I talk about defunding the police, what I want to see, Chris, is less police, because we are over-policed as a community. Police were established for the maintenance of the Black community. It originated from slave patrols when slaves would run away and try to get away from the inhumane treatment. It was these patrols that went out and gathered them back to bring them back to the plantations. They would ask, where are your papers at? Where's your permission to be off? Which is analogous to now, where's your license? Where's your registration? Where's your proof of insurance? Where is your proof that you have the freedom to be out here on these streets? And there are other ways. We have other issues that are going on in our community that are much more serious than police. And that, the work that you all do at Beyond Housing and the money that you need. So when I say defund the police, what I'm talking about is, let's cut those budgets. Let's cut those budgets significantly, and let's invest in pre-K education. For one, most of our children are not getting proper pre-K education. So when they get to kindergarten, they are already behind, and they never catch up. By the time they get to 5th, 6th, 7th grade, they continue to be behind. By the time they get to 8th and 9th grade, then they're catching juvenile cases, and then they end up in the criminal justice system because they have trouble comprehending, they have trouble reading, and they don't have a skill set. people that have a skill set are less likely to get involved in any kind of violent crime. I represent these individuals on a regular basis, and I can open up a file. Even before I open a file, I can tell you certain things before I even look at it. So I say defund the police. Let's invest in pre-K education. Let's invest in economic development. Let's invest in mental health. Let's invest in higher education. Let's invest in job skills, job training. There are other ways that this money can be spent other than just solely continually to invest and continuing to militarize the police. Their funding is never questioned. It just continues to go up and up and up. I saw in New York where they cut $1 billion out of the police budget, $1 billion, and still have significant funding. And we know the crisis, and especially in St. Louis, the crisis that we're under. I'm in DC right now, and I look back at the things that are happening here in DC, and I look at the things that are happening in St. Louis. And I'm proud of when we talked about the Ferguson movement, you know, I can see the Ferguson movement in DC right now. But we have to reallocate that funding. We cannot continue to fund the police at the level that we're funding them and think that we're going to get a change and not address some of these other systemic issues that are happening in our communities.
So Clay, it'd be hard to argue with Jerrold on the investment in pre-K, the investment in so many other places in communities that desperately need that, and how we serve our children and prepare them to be successful. In your mind, what does a bridge look like to kind of where we're at today to get to that place that Jerrold's talking about? And I'm of course, the assumption I'm making is Jerrold still says we still have to have some public safety, right? We still have to have some notion of that when you have a problem that you can call someone, but again, not to the scale and scope that we see it today. So Clay, what does a bridge look like from today to where I think, again, you're in support of additional resources for community as well as the police officers? What does a bridge look like in your mind?
Right, I think that communication is huge. People need to know exactly what you mean and what you want. So if you just throw something out there and just say defund, well, let's explain to people what that looks like. Let's explain to them what that means, and then they will say, okay, well, I'm with it. I think we definitely need that, because the majority of people want that. They want things to be the right way. So we have to communicate with people. We have to be open-minded. We have to, and I don't even like using sides. I used to like to say both parties. So law enforcement and the community, both parties, we have to be open-minded. We have to find some happy median to come together and move this thing forward, because it just can't come from either party. It's just no way we're going to do that. So we both need to knuckle down, come up with some great solutions to where we can, so the community can get what they need, and the police department as well. Because again, like, even that's great that the New York police department did that for $1 billion. But Chris, you know as well as I do, we have 55 police departments in St. Louis County, and all together their budgets ain't $1 billion. So that's what I mean by look at each individual budget, and we can, if there's money there to reallocate, by all means we need to do it, because all of that is important. Everything that he said is important. The education, all of that, because that's what keeps these kids from coming on this other side, is education. Right.
So again, this idea of defund the police is recognizing and acknowledging all the other challenges that communities face.
Absolutely.
And put resources on the preventative side, right? We don't need another research that says if we invest in our kids when they're younger, it's a good thing, right? That's fact.
Because that mental health thing is real. The mental health thing is real. That's why I just appreciate Dr. Kendra Holmes so much, and the work that they're doing with the FINIA, even with the office and the diversion program. So we're keeping these low-level nonviolent people out of the justice system, and we're giving them the help that they need instead of just throwing them in jail. And that's been very successful. So things like that, yes, we do need to fund more, and those are great programs that we need.
All right, let's
Chris, can I just want to throw something out there. I think I understand what defund means, but it seems like to me reallocating, we need more money, not reallocation. We need to fix the police situation and deal with racism. Why are we taking scraps, from the police department when we need a whole? I think we need more money for all of our stuff, not reallocation. That just doesn't resonate with me. We need to fix the police, the culture. We need to do all of that, but we need more resources, because this reminds me of years ago when they talked about defunding education and doing this and that. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
Well, if I could just add, if I could just respond to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
The problem is that the pie, we do need more money. I agree with that. But too large a slice of the pie is going to the police. And that's why we have to defund it, because there's too much emphasis there. This country puts too much emphasis on policing, and we put too much emphasis on military and on war. And that's why the budget is only so big, but too large of a pie is going to the police, militarizing them, and as an overall going in the country to the military. That's one thing when you talk about the battle that we're having in this country with China now. We've been at war for the last 17, 20 years. China has been investing in their infrastructure and in their people for the last 17 to 20 years. And that's why they're in a different place right now than we are. And that's why they have become the superpower that they have become. And so that is why we say defund the police, because we can't keep funding them at this same level. It has to stop, and it needs to stop now.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting we run at the same level. I was just saying we don't have enough of what you talked about.
So I think we would all agree that. I think we would all agree that we need a bigger doggone pie, and we need more of that pie to go the investing in our children and in our neighborhoods versus militarizing our police. I think we can all agree that, because there's so many other things we need to do with. Let's make a pivot to voter education. There's a notion that if community would just show up at the polls, we could solve everything. Gina, I'll start with you. Is there some truth to that? And why is there this sense that we struggle with voter apathy? And maybe we got an election just around the corner, and then one in August, and one in November. So talk a little bit about this idea of voter education and controlling, having a say in what happens.
Well, wow, that's a big question, Chris. But what I would say first off is it's super important for people to understand that they matter. And in my mind, the best way for people to understand that they matter is by exercising their right to vote. I mean, we just lost an icon today who was willing to get beat down. I mean, a couple of them for that right, because they understood that until we had a right, a say-so in terms of what happened in this country, that we will forever be in the situation that we were in and for the most part still in. But here's the thing with voter education. People don't know it. They don't understand what it means. They don't understand that judge that just gave your son 25 years, you voted for him, and that's what he does all the time instead of thinking about a diversion program. People don't understand that the amount of money your community may get may be dependent on doing the census. It may be dependent on who you vote into office. They don't understand. Chris, I can't tell you the work. I've been doing this work since 2017 after the last election. I can't tell you how much time I spend educating people on just basic stuff like how to register to vote, why they should vote, how to research different people so you can understand. I was in the Board of Elections office about a week and a half ago. Young man was in there. He was getting ready to vote absentee. He couldn't have been more than 18, 19 years old. He gets his absentee ballot. He goes around into the place to exercise his vote. He comes back out. He tells the woman at the desk, he says, I don't know who these people are, what these issues are. Can you explain it to me? How can I find out? Now here he is. He's hungry. He's eager. He's ready to vote. And the lady, you know, she works for the Board of Elections. There's not much that she could do for him. So I just stepped in. I said, hey, grab your phone. Do this. Sit down right there and just look and just, you know, and I'm explaining all this to him, how to do this. No one ever told him about this. The other thing is a lot of the stuff that Black people that we have gotten, you know, albeit not enough, we didn't vote for it. You know what I mean? So I think that whole notion of voting just never really sunk in. And when I ask people about how to, you know, do you vote? And if they tell me they vote, you know, and then I'll follow up and I'll say, well, why did you vote? My mom voted. My grandmother voted. My grandfather would kill me if I didn't vote. So they got it. They learned from their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, the importance of voting. But we don't talk about this in school. We don't talk about, you know, you get a basic little information when maybe you're a junior, you know, the executive branch, the judicial branch, the other branch, and that's all you get.
Right.
And so I think it's incumbent upon us that's the reason why voter education is so important. I think if people understood it, that there wouldn't be this apathy.
Katrina, your thoughts, and then we'll come to you, Jerryl.
With voting, you know, the vote or die, all these sort of gimmicks that have taken place for all this time. My attitude, and I think that one of the problems is that the way we reach other generations is that ask the simple question, why don't they want you to vote? Why did they take so much work to stop brown and Black people from voting? My motto, my personal motto in life is to do everything that the people who have tried to oppress my ancestors didn't want me to do. Education, right? Voting, protests, run for public office. And see, the problem is we simplify it. And just like the problem with that when people say, I don't like the term defund the police, because it's because you have to simplify it because it's a minute statement, but it's more complex. Don't just vote. Show up when they have campaign rallies. Look at local elections. Go to your alderman, city council meetings. Voice your concern. Go to your school council. The problem is that when people think of voting, they really push it for national elections. And the one thing we've learned recently with national elections is how much a national leader affects our daily life. See, we didn't really experience that before on this level ever. We've had national leaders that have done amazing things, but it affects my daily life? No. But living in a pandemic in this type of hostile world and realizing that this is influenced directly from a national elected leader, that affects my daily life. But what has always affected our daily life is local. It may not be sexy, but aldermen and city council and the judge and the prosecutor in 2014 have to say, we didn't even know what to say name of the prosecutor, but we know this person wasn't helping us out. You know? And so those type of elections, so I think is that you have to realize that oftentimes we're voting for the lesser of two evils, right? We're stuck in a two-party system and people, we're tired of it. You know, we're tired of this two-party system. It's like, do I vote candidate A who doesn't look out for me, or candidate B who doesn't look out for me either? But at least out of the two, one ain't trying to kill you for Black and brown people, just to be honest right now. One's not trying to actually kill Black and brown people. And so I think that I understand people are tired of vote and we get real gimmicky with it, but do it simply because they don't want you to do it. And I was a very rebellious kid. I did stuff, my 3-year-old does stuff. Do it simply because why does the man who hurt you not want you to do it? The symbolic man, the historical man. And so yes, voting is not it though. Oh my gosh, that's not it. City council, school board, checking your police, going to do, you know, are the police going to the alder meeting, questioning the police about how they're driving through your neighborhood, and consistently where you are aggravating them and they know your face and they have to answer your question. That's all tied up in voting. And at one time, we had in some areas like 90-95% of Black people voting. It's not like Black people just did. When 1965, people were lined up. You know, Mississippi had these high numbers in counties and what have you. So people did vote. It's just that we got tired of the same bad. But now we realize the devil you know and the other devil you know, man, we've never had such day-to-day influence on our life that is in the power of voting. Right. Our national leaders affects our health. Yep. And so that's something you have to think about.
So, and Chris too, we, in 2018, our project did a research study. We looked at 20 polling places, 10 in St. Louis City, 10 in St. Louis County, and then we divided them up based on high population Black, high population white, and income, so forth. What we were trying to determine is what are the processes, what are the infrastructures that keep people from being able to vote in those particular sectors. In every single situation, there were more police presence in the Black community. There were more issues with machines breaking down. There were more issues with longer wait times. You know, everything, all the classic things happened there and did not happen in the white community. So, I mean, those are sort of the things too that people need to understand, so that we can figure out what policies, what recommendations, what pressures can we put on our local Board of Elections offices. People don't realize that if you live in St. Louis City and you move to St. Louis County, you have to re-register. People don't quite get that. So, I mean, there's just tons and tons of things that need to happen, and why voter education is important.
Yeah, all right, Jerryl, I'm gonna give you the last word on this, but I do want to go back real quick to Katrina. The first statement you made was, I'm gonna paraphrase you. You want to do everything that your ancestors were prevented from doing. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Love that.
Yes,
Love that.
That's my personal motto.
Love that. Love that. All right, Jerryl, I'll give you the last word on voter education, voting, getting to the polling place, being engaged.
Voting is important. I was listening to Malcolm X this week, and what he said in the 60s is still true today. What's happening with the Black population and voting is that we're being chumps. We have the ability to swing any election, either way we go, whether it be with the Republicans, whether it be with the Democrats. We have the power to swing the election, but we are not making demands for our people. We're not asking for the things that our people need. We're not holding elected officials accountable, and we have elected officials that are using their positions to enrich themselves in our community, but not actually helping our community. And so we have to, I look at the Jewish population. They don't have a problem with exercising their power for their benefit. Now we're all being asked to run and vote for Joe Biden, to make him our #1 priority. But then when it comes time to talk about reparations, then we become a lower priority. So how is it that they have to be our first priority, but then we're their last priority? And that's the problem, and that's what consistently happens. And politics is all local. When I ran for a prosecutor, you had to educate the Black community on why the prosecutor's office was important and why we needed to have Black prosecutors. But you fast forward now to Kim Gardner, you fast forward to Wesley Bell. By the time their elections came up, the community, because of the deaths and the police brutality, they understood the importance of why you needed to have a Black prosecutor. Wesley Bell came in off of the way Bob McCullough handled that grand jury process with Mike Brown. You talk about Ferguson. We still want justice for Mike Brown. Darren Wilson's still walking around here free. Look at all of us, including myself, that have a platform now because of 2014, because of Ferguson, because of Mike Brown laid down there dead. Everybody has a platform now, and they still don't have justice for him. So we have waves of why we need to vote, and we have to show some strength. Those of us that are educated in the community, those of us that are in politics, we have to hold these people feet to the fire and make them accountable. And when the people start seeing that these people are going to be accountable to us, they have more of a thirst and an enthusiasm to vote.
All right, let's see if we can kind of transition here. We're getting close to the close. So there clearly is some energy around the protests all across the country, and here in St. Louis. How do we keep the momentum, and how do we not just have some actions, but have actions then lead to policy, then lead to again the reallocation of resources? And I'll start with you, Gina.
So in thinking about what, this discussion and everything that we talked about, the first thing that comes to mind is that we have a lot to do. The second thing that comes to mind is that a lot of great strides have been made. Unfortunately, at the lives of our loved ones and all those sorts of things. But what I would kind of say in closing is what I think is probably the more critical thing that that the movement brought is it brought more people into the conversation about everything that needs to be done. And had it not been for that, had it not been for these other things, the unfortunate part is the tragedy that comes along with it. But as I was saying earlier about people and their ability and why they should vote, I just believe, and I'll close with this, is that people don't realize their value and that they're important. And that until we help people recognize that they are of value, that they are important, whether we all agree or whether we don't, it doesn't matter, but you matter. So, I don't know how we do that. I think we keep voting. I think we keep talking about it. I think we keep bringing more people into the conversation. I can't tell you how jazzed I am to see younger people standing up and speaking. It's like, whoa, intelligent people that have things to say, and it's not just one person. We don't have just one leader. And I think it's fabulous. And Chris, thank you for all the hard work that Beyond Housing does. It's just fabulous.
Thank you, Gina. Clay, how do we keep the momentum going?
By getting involved. We need to get more and more people involved, like Dr. McClendon said, especially our young people, man. It jazzes me as well when I see the young people getting involved. I don't even like to say I'm old, but the kids are younger than me. But yeah, we have to just continue to get more and more people involved, and this thing can culminate into something awesome. And I'm really excited to do my small part in getting us there.
Thank you, Jerryl. How do we build on this momentum? How do we keep moving forward and not let it fizzle out?
We keep pushing and we push harder. Chris, at Beyond Housing, you have to push harder right now. You have to think bigger than you've ever thought before. Think of things that you would have never imagined to ask for. We need to be making large and huge asks right now. Elizabeth Warren is trying to get rid of qualified immunity. We need to get rid of qualified immunity. We closing the workhouse. We ending chokeholds. We want the officers charged in Kentucky that killed Breonna Taylor. We want justice for George Floyd. We want Darren Wilson in jail. We got to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing. That's how we keep the energy going. We have a multitude of issues that are still going on locally in St. Louis. We got to get Kim Gardner reelected in 3 weeks. We got the President of the United States, the Senator Josh Hawley, the Attorney General Eric Schmidt. All of these people are coming down on this one woman in a local race right now. That tells you how important that is, that the whole country would focus in on her. We got to get her elected. That's enough momentum right now to keep us going to the election. So we got to keep thinking big. I think we've been thinking too small, and that's the problem. We got to make some huge asks that we've never made before. Reparations. Every time you say reparations, people say, what does that look like? Well, it's a different ways to look at it. But what I say now, because I worked in DC, let's just go ahead right now and allocate $25 trillion for reparations. And then we're going to work the rest out. But let's go ahead and budget the money right now. Let's set the money aside right now so that we can start working on these things. And we got to not be afraid to ask those big asks. I think that Dr. Moore brought it up about Dr. King and his letters to the Birmingham jail. He said, if not now, when? We're not gonna be here forever. And we're in a moment right now that we need to take advantage of. So I think all of our asks, all of us that have the ability to move the community should be making huge asks that we've never dreamed of making before.
Fantastic. Katrina.
I completely agree. I think this huge ask, and I think that needs to go on a federal level. I think that we need to do local changes, but I think some of the things that we need and some of the major things that you've seen in African-American, Black and brown people's history is federally. Some things just need to be completely changed. And also we need to, as young people, I'm putting myself in a young category, by the way, as young people, we need to be angry, righteously angry. And there's nothing wrong. And so continue that. The problem is this, you get tired. And you know what? We also need to stop this generational gap that's in this movement. My older brothers and sisters, stop talking about younger brothers and sisters in a negative way. Stop criticizing their outer appearance and understand that we all need to get that foot off of our neck. And so we need to do it together. So I think we need to get rid of this generational gap, which means young people, we need to listen to our older family and say, okay, how can we do this? And we need to get organized in some ways, all these local groups nationally, and we need to sort of push these things federally. A lot of these offices are up. So we do have to vote. If a bunch of Black and brown people got registered in the next couple of weeks, you think they won't listen to us a little bit more? We need to push for that and be righteously angry. And not every time there's another body on the street. We need to just keep this momentum going so we won't have any more bodies on our streets.
Fantastic. There's not much I'm going to add after all y'all, but I will say this clearly. What we heard is we need energy, we need commitment, we need constructive anger and frustration that we haven't gotten as far as we should have by now, and keep pressing. And again, if we don't, things won't change. Because again, no one gives away power. No one gives away things that give them control. You have to take it from them. That's just how power works. Register to vote. Know the topics. Know if you don't know, find out. Ask somebody. Census. Fill out the doggone census. The census is money. Simple as I can tell you. Every person who fills out the census, $1,300 federal dollars come to your community. Fill out the census. I know it's not easy to trust DC, but you got to fill out the census. Bring some money back to your community. Get your fair share in your community. To my panelists, thank you for your energy, for your wisdom, for your drive, for your commitment to this work. I greatly appreciate it. I'll pitch it back to Raina Spencer to give us the close.
Thank you all for tuning in, and this video will be available on our 24/1 website. Thank you for your questions and comments. We got plenty of them. Be on the lookout for our next installment or our next round of discussions, which will happen August 1st, again, virtually via Facebook Live. And then we will have a conference August 22nd, and you can sign up and do a deeper dive into the subject matter and talk with some of our experts and learn how to continue to build your own community, empower your own community, and lift up all of your neighbors and residents in your community. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Chris. And we are signing off.